Howdy, folks, and welcome to another day in the Milky Way. And tonight we're going to have a great show because we're talking about the discovery of America with Columbus Day coming right up with my co-host, Hawkeye Two Feathers, David Null. Thank you for being here tonight.
Thank you as always, Robert, and greetings and blessings to all of you out there. We want to especially send blessings and prayers out to the folks who were affected by this hurricane. It was about 40 miles to the east of me, and we would have, here in my neighborhood, would have been a lot worse. It's going to take to the end of October before they can fix my phone line in the house.
Wow.
But thank goodness I have internet, and thank goodness I don't have any house damage. But, 40 miles east of me, there are a lot of folks who don't have anything. And so please, and the folks in North Carolina and North Georgia, where the flooding has gone nuts, the river here, it went up to over 15 feet, which is way high. 9 feet is like lower flood stage. And so, it was 6 feet above flood stage. But there's so much water on the ground that it's going to take it a while to go down the rivers. It's really amazing how much water we got. So, but with that said, we greet you with the love and the honor of the infinite creator. And as always, we thank you for showing up.
Absolutely. Can you hear me? I changed microphone.
Yeah, you went out for a second.
Oh, okay. I'm going to.
I can't hear you.
Testing 1, 2, 3. Either. Maybe it won't be better.
I can't hear you.
Yeah, apparently not.
Nope.
Better. Nope.
Okay. Wait.
Move to this one.
Okay.
The best.
Yep.
Well, that's just the way it goes. I was thinking, why is it?
That's just the way it goes.
Oh, Off the Hook is in the house. Scotty Boy is here. Everybody is coming in. Witchy Moon is in the house. Hello. She says hello. Yes, Scotty Boy. Boy, we got a good show tonight for all of you. I'm glad you made it through the hurricane. A lot of people, there's a lot of people out there really suffering from all of this. And I just send blessings out there for them too. And I wish I could do something for them, but I guess at this point, you got to sink or swim, and the flood waters will go down and people will rebuild. It's just sad that the water came down so fast, and that, you just don't have time to prepare. You should be prepared. You never know what's going to happen in this world. That's why, preppers are number one. Get a bug out bag. You may have to abandon your house at any given moment. The waters are rising. Run for it. Sit on the roof of your house as you lose everything. I don't know.
Yep. And folks out in Arkansas in the Ozarks, you can get an inch of rain and it'll rise 2 feet. And so folks know if it's raining and you're down along the river, you need a bug out plan. But in looking at some of the weather reports and stuff, it beats the record of 1901. So it's been over 100 years in many of those locations. And so people say, ooh, it's global warming. Listen, it happened in 1901. So let's just remember that. There have been floods and heavy rains for a long time. Thank goodness here at my house, the river came up, but, 10 miles east of me, it came up, 9 feet.
Wow. Yeah. Well, like places like Arkansas, that's rocky ground. The water doesn't sink in real well. And if you get a big rainstorm, it runs off fast. And that's what creates a lot of these floods, is when the rain comes down so fast, it doesn't soak into the ground. And
Well, also, but even up there in North Carolina, it's the fact that there are mountains and there's nowhere for the water to go but up. Here
yeah,
in South Georgia, with the swamps and everything, the water comes up, but then it goes sideways.
yeah,
So at 15 feet, we got we got fields that are 10 feet full of water
yeah,
that are
yeah.
going to have to empty into the river at some point.
Some point, yeah.
So
Oh, I agree. I agree. I agree. Ah, that's off the hooks in the house. And Chloe's in the house. Hello, Chloe. She's probably at work listening or something like that. But I appreciate each and every one of you for being here tonight as we get on with our show. And tonight I'm going to be talking about Columbus. And I'm going to get this up here, but then you got a great story tonight. So
yeah,
looking forward
segue into the name of the story tonight is called The Star Maiden, and it's an Ojibwe story.
Oh wow, nice. Nope, I think I gotta find the right file here. But anyway, as we go, we're gonna talk about who discovered America, and was it Columbus? Was it the Chinese? You know, we kind of touched on that a little bit last week, where we came up with this picture here, and I'm gonna enlarge it a little bit and present it to y'all. We came up with this. We talked about, or was it this, or was it Saturday? I can't remember. Now the Chinese said that they got maps like this one that date back to 1411 that shows America. Well, if they hadn't been there, you wouldn't have a map now, would you? It just explains a lot of things. Did the Chinese go there first? Yeah, well, we just don't know. They could have. Or was it this guy, Mr. Christopher Columbus himself? Did he discover America? Or was it the Egyptians? Did did they discover America? We're still trying to debate this. Christopher Columbus, we know because they publicized him. He was the guy that we really, really was led to believe that he discovered America. Shows up on the shore, meets the natives. We see all these nice pictures. They give him a bunch of gifts of gold and trinkets and feathers and flowers, as you can see in the background where the guys he brought with him, well, they're carrying guns. You notice the natives don't have any arrows or bows. They're coming in peace. They're coming with weapons. And what are they doing? They're also, I love artists. They're depicting this. See, the natives are out here frolicking and in the nude. They don't care. They're having a good old time. They're going to give the Europeans some gifts and trinkets. And what are the Europeans doing? They're bringing their weapons. They're bringing their boats and their people. They're bringing religion also. And the natives have no clue what's going on. Hey, we're here to enslave you. We're here to take you over. We're here to do all kinds of atrocities to you. And don't you worry about it. But thanks for all the good gifts, right?
Right. Go back to that picture, please.
I can.
Now, to me, what's obviously wrong with that picture?
Well, the natives look like Europeans, but
well, they even look worse than that. They look like albinos or aborigines.
Yes, they do.
They do not look. Native Americans don't look like that. Now, there are some natives who, they use ash and different things, to put on their bodies for certain ceremonies, but they don't walk around like that.
No.
Nuh-uh. So whoever did that one, they had they wanted to portray them savages as totally different.
Oh, totally. Yes, exactly. So I did a lot of reading, and I got an old Columbus book. It's pretty cool. Well, anyway, we're gonna go on here. Here's another depiction. We're just gonna go through some of these pictures and the depictions. Of course, here it shows Columbus and he looks like this old man now, and he was only like in his 35, 40, right in there, that era when he came here. Now, and you see these other guys, these old men. You don't bring old men on a trip like this. You bring young men. Anyway, and here he is. I discovered this country. It's just so great. Look at me. In the name of the king and the queen. Here, I stake this land as ours, right?
And the Pope.
And the Pope, of course. And again, when he returns here or he's leaving, one or the other, the Queen Isabella, oh boy, thank you for letting me go and giving me these ships, and how gracious this picture shows it could be. Was it really like that? Not so much, and we're going to find that out too. Here's another guy. This guy, you probably never heard of him. He was an African guy. And his name was, he was sent by King Musa, who was the richest king in the world, ever in the world. He was 700 years before Columbus, or at least somewhere in there. He sent a guy named Arukabai, or something like Arukabai, I guess it was. I'm not sure exactly on the name. But anyway, Masa Arukabai II, 181 years before Columbus. Oh, sorry, it was 700 years ago, 81 years before Columbus. Look at John Smith and Pocahontas. John Smith is 50. Savagely, I get you. Look at John Smith and Pocahontas. Yeah, big age difference there. So this rich king, he sent over, he had 2,000, get this, 2,000 ships. So, and at one time he went on an excursion to, the upper Africa, to Egypt and stuff, and he brought 12 tons of gold along with him. Can you believe that? 12 tons of gold. A herd of camels. He had to have 500 camels that he brought to carry all this gold. He sent ships over with this guy to South America. And you can see he left here and he took the short trip right here across the Atlantic Ocean, and he made it over to South America. Unfortunately, he never made a return trip, or if he did make a return trip, I think he only went once or twice, but I couldn't find a lot of information on this. And as you can see, he set sail and he went here, and he realized there was land because this would have been the shortest route. He also made it over to Mexico, Central America. He made it up the coast of Florida over by Georgia, where you're at. So these guys were, and we can see this, but by the who settled these areas. We got a black tribe of in Panama, of Darien, Panama. We have a primary areas of the Olmec influence, where they had the Olmecs. We have the Persicus and the Black Mojave, the Gull Islands. So they, with 2,000 ships, you're going to make an appearance somewhere. You know what I'm saying? But they don't want to talk about these guys, discovering America. It's only Columbus. And we have writings. We have Malan Emperor Masala Musu, perhaps the richest man who ever lived, to thank for one of the few accounts of Arukabai's adventure. Well, you need a rich guy to sponsor your adventure. That's for sure. Of course, they did have ships. They made these big, giant ships of reeds. And we know because people have made them today to see if they could set sail across the waters. And they have done those things. You can look it up on YouTube. There's places where you can see where they can take these ships out onto the ocean and sail them. And they have made it across, just to prove a point. We also have, we're going to get into this guy here. And who is he? Leif Erikson. And he was a Or no, this ain't Leif Erikson. Sorry, that's wrong guy. This is Prince Modoc. He was a Welsh man. He was Welsh, and he was the son of a king. The king had 19 sons, but he just didn't believe in war. So he was going to go search out a country where there was no war. And he may have made it to America early on, too. We're going to go into that a little bit. And he sailed away, and I guess he made several trips. And then eventually, one time, he just never came back. And can you blame him? They were warring over in Europe. The English were trying to take over the Welsh, and eventually they did. But he did leave his influence on the native people with their speaking, with some of their language that was found to be true. Some of the Indians ended up having blue eyes and red hair, and you don't get that by just chance. Also, the Indians who make these, which is the Mandan, who make these round tugboats. We talked about these made out of buffalo robe hides or whatever, and they take them sailing. They're the same construction type of a boat that the Welsh made. So was it their idea, or was it Welsh influence that, influenced the Indians to make round boats? Good question, isn't it? Okay, now we get up to Leif Erikson.
Can I make a comment about that?
Yeah, go ahead. The boats or this guy?
About the round boat thingy, and it being a buffalo hide.
Yeah.
If you cut a buffalo down the middle normally and skin him and open it up, and then what you've got, one of the easiest things to do would be to gather it up like a basket. Yeah. So it would also be prudent because you wouldn't have to do much work on the hide.
This is true.
And they knew how to make baskets, let me tell you.
Well, yeah, but here's the thing. These Indians, why didn't they make a canoe?
Oh, I think they may have, but for day-to-day floating around, they may have just made those for, local stuff, simply because they would have been easier to build. It's really easy to make a basket. It really is. And if you've got a buffalo hide that's just the right size, and you make that basket to fit that hide, you got a boat. Yeah. Whereas a canoe, you got to make a structure, and you got to do this, and there's a lot more engineering in that. But it's real easy to make a basket. So I'm just saying they might have looked at it actually as a practical sense. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Oh, Deborah L. Smith says, "Happy belated birthday to you."
Thank you.
So, hey, Deborah. Chloe's got to get home. She's got a headache. Savage Lee's in the house. Came to America and went native. Not the worst retirement plan. I love it. Nina's in the house. Basket weaving 101. Absolutely, yeah. But that's the thing. Did they get it from the Welsh? Because these round boats were, and there was the influence, like I said, they were recorded with blue eyes and lighter skin. So, that's the question. Was it the Welsh influence? Did Prince Modoc and some of his men get stranded there and just incorporate themselves into the native tribes? We'll never know. I mean, we really won't. I mean, we will, but we won't. You know what I'm saying? I guess nowadays do like DNA testing or something, but they've run through the tribes so much with other bloodlines now that it would be almost impossible, I imagine. Okay, then we get up to Leif Erikson. Did he discover America in 999 AD? So, Eric the Red, did he discover it? these are the kind of boats they would have been sailing. It kind of looks modern. They could have probably made this boat go across the ocean. You know, and then here's his trip. As you can see, he would have. They were scouting out. They went to Iceland. They did make it to Greenland. We found settlements there, and then they made it over here to you know, over to Quebec even, to Newfoundland and stuff like that. So why not down the coast of the United States, at least to New York?
It would have been easy to sail down the coast.
Yes.
In those types of ships, it would have been real easy because they're not deep harbor boats like what the English had. And so it would have been easy to sail them down the coast.
Yes, very easy. And, you know, okay, where do we got here?
As a sailing boat, it would have been much easier to sail one of the Viking ships versus one of them big galleons.
Yes, absolutely. So, you know, just like here, you know, this is mapped out good. It would have just came down the coast, you know, over here by New York. They may have not went all the way down, but this here area is just like their own homeland, green and trees and, you know, lots of stuff. And they found structures nowadays, you know, stone structures where they made their houses and set up. They said that they might have been there for, you know, up to 50 years, but then something happened and they left. So, or they died out, one or the other. So the question is what happened? You know, why didn't they keep it up? I mean, or what was there a war or something? I don't know.
Yeah, or a disease. But also, let me throw this in. Up in the New England area, there have been a lot of people, especially over the years, who have investigated their properties, let's say. And in the hills and foothills and so forth, there are people who have discovered hinges. And they've discovered, you know, where they're monoliths, where there are big, huge rocks. They're not real big. They're not real tall. Some of them are close to the ground. Some of them are built into the ground. But there are some things up in New England that, quite frankly, goes back to the Celts and to the Welsh and to them folk. So you say, well, you know, there's not much evidence. Well, if you look at some of the monoliths and things that are up in that northeast, you know, of the United States, wait a minute, maybe you should rethink that.
Yeah, well, and that's the thing. The people of Europe built with stone. They built with, you know, they built houses and had stoves and fireplaces. Where the Indians, they like to take the easy way, you know, sticks and twigs and throw some dirt over it, and you got yourself a hut, and you move on, and you don't make your camp in one place forever. You move around. You follow the food chain kind of thing, especially in the north.
Yep, and also one of the interesting things, scratch your head about this, is some of the large stones and monoliths they found up in the Northeast. These things are heavy. How did they move these suckers? So my point in some of this is that did they bring, not only did they come over, but did they bring some sort of extra technology with them, a knowledge, so that they could move some of those big stones, you know, even though they're not nearly as grandiose as they are over in England and Ireland and so forth. But these stones are still huge.
Exactly. Well, here's the thing, is Europeans move stones. They figure out ways to do it. Indians didn't bother taking time to move a giant stone. We know that to be true. That to them was like too much work. We're not moving stones. They don't want to do that. Just leave it be. Europeans build castles out of stones. They break them apart. They move them. They struggle and strive to move a giant log or stone or whatever. The Indians couldn't give a shit. You know?
Yep. Well, the Indian philosophy is basically to do no harm to the earth. And
Yeah.
so, you know, cutting stone and toting it and all that was just not in their philosophy. I mean, it still isn't, you know.
Yeah.
So, but the Western, Eastern, Western, depending on which way you're looking at it, right? But the European models, though, you know, they've been building in stone since it seems like day one.
Yes. Yes. That's I mean, you know, they're instructed and taught in how to move and make stuff out of stone, whereas the Indians, they didn't do that. They didn't do it unless you were in Mexico or somewhere where they got the big pyramids and stuff. There was no, you know, stone moving in the northern half there. Just didn't have time, and it wasn't practical to them. So yeah, anyway, we're going to get moving on here. The Vikings came, they may have went down as far as New York, Nova Scotia, Quebec, Point Rossi. They were trading. A big trade back then was ivory. They were killing walruses and you know, selling the ivory from the walruses. And they were catching, believe it or not, polar bears. That was an oddity. They didn't have those over in what you call it, in the Norway area, and you know, wherever the Vikings were from, Denmark and stuff. So they would bring polar bears back, believe it or not. They would go out, catch a polar bear, put it in a cage, and ship it back to the mainland and sell it. They get big bucks. Whereas the Indians would have no point in catching a live polar bear. That just, you know, that they don't do that. Anyway.
Well, they'd kill it and eat it.
Oh yeah, that's their thing, killing and eating it.
So, which is interesting, the native folks would just kill it and eat it versus capture it, but the Vikings saw the monetary value.
Yes.
Of the polar bear and went, ooh, let's not kill it, let's take it home. You know, so interesting.
Yep, exactly. Like I said, they were in it for that. So now we go to this old book. I have this cool old book. Stop sharing here. And I got this cool old book. You gotta love old books. And I cannot do it justice. It's got really cool pictures. You know, I showed you all those pictures, but this is what they depict Christopher Columbus to be of. That's what he looks like, if you all can see that. This is the exploration, discovery, and conquest of the New World. Believe it or not. And like I always say that, you know, after 1900, the history changes, right? And this book was printed in entered and according to the Act of Congress in the year 1910. So we're right on the cusp of all history changing, right? So now we know that for I don't know how long. Now you tell me, you're older than I am, more wiser than I am. When did they start coming out with this Leif Erikson, you know, discovering America? When did they come up with some of these other guys discovering America besides Columbus? Do you remember? Just recently, you know, the last 10, 20 years?
No. When I was in grade school, now I went to Catholic school all of my high school, grade school. So now I can't vouch for what they were teaching in the public schools is my point. But we were taught about Leif Erikson coming over back in the 60s. So, you know, for folks who are going, oh, this is a new thing. Nah, hell, it ain't. No, I'm sorry. There were those of us who remember our history from the 1960s and some of the books that we were reading from, because, you know, 62, 63, we still had books from the 50s. So we were going on information that came out of the 50s into the 60s, okay, as far as educational. So, but no, it was in the books back then, at least in the books that the Catholics had, okay.
Yes,
So
and maybe
it was, it was widely distributed through all the Catholic schools. So there was that. So it wasn't like it was a secret. Okay.
yep, yeah. Well, and that's what I'm saying is I think back then it was slowly getting out of it, and then I don't remember him telling us the Leif Erikson or the Vikings or the Africans or whatever landed there. It was just Columbus. It was Columbus, Columbus, Columbus. He discovered America. You should know this. Sing the little song. He came over the ocean blue.
Yeah.
But whatever.
But
Anyway,
see, but we also learned about Amerigo Vespucci, which, Amerigo, wait a minute. And Amerigo, ain't that Americus? Amerigo, that ain't, what? But you don't hear about him. And I remember studying him too. I can't remember. He might have been Portuguese. I can't remember, but with a Amerigo Vespucci sounds Spanish,
Yeah.
so it could have been Italian, but to the point though. So, but you don't hear about him, and we learned about him in school. So I still remember,
Mhm.
really.
Well, absolutely. But they knew about, and I keep going and harping about this. They knew about America, the New World, long before Columbus, long before Leif Erikson, long before. And I'm going to go back even farther than that.
And we discussed this before, Robert, in that you and I both agree they just happened to pick Columbus as the guy.
The guy, exactly.
The guy. Well, who discovered it? It was him. It was Chris. Well, what about all these? No. Chris is the guy, man.
Yeah,
we all agree Chris is the guy.
Yes, and this book here tells about it too. So we're going to go back really far. We're going to go back before Plato. We're going to go back to Solon. Solon influenced Plato. And I'm going to read a little bit out of this book. Solon was one of the 7 wise men of Greece who lived in the 6th and 7th centuries BC. Get this? BC. He traveled into far countries and learned all of the stages of the nations that had to teach him. He went to Egypt, and he astonished the priests and learned the learned men of the country. So he was a super smart. He was a wise man, and he was traveling the world, learning even more. By telling him, so he went to Egypt. And he was telling them all the stuff he knew and everything. And they said, we know way more than you. And he said, what? And then he started telling them of the history of Greece. And he started telling them of Athens and the city which he was a native. And they said, Solon explained, one of the oldest of them, the Greeks are nothing but children, and an aged Greek there is none. Much surprised at this, the traveler asked the priest what he meant, and received in reply such an account of the knowledge which the Egyptians possessed of other peoples, as to make him accept for truth what had seen but an idle boast. Among other things, the old priest told him of a vast island, or rather a continent, which once lay in the great ocean to the west of Europe, and which was reached by a short voyage after the sailor had passed the Pillars of Hercules, as the Strait of Gibraltar was then called. The people of this continent had often made war upon those of Europe and had been much dreaded by them. But a series of earthquakes and volcanic eruptions and similar calamities had caused this great island to sink into the waters of the ocean, with all its vast hordes of inhabitants, and the people of Europe had thus been saved from this terrible enemy. The sinking of this island, the priest added, had so blocked up the ocean with mud as to make it forever afterwards impassable. The date of this destruction he fixed at a point about 9,000 years before his own time. Solon returned to Greece bearing this information with him, but it does not seem to have been made public until the time of his descendant, Plato, who lived about 200 years later. and we have no means of knowing how much Plato added to the original story in the treasury of his own mind. It is from this source that we derive the classic fable of the lost Atlantis. So we're getting a little bit of this Atlantis in here. Anyway, so was there, continent? Was it an island? And did that, lead people to know that there is another land to the west somewhere? But then the waters were so muddied that they couldn't go there anymore. And maybe that's why people stopped making trips to, the Americas at some point in time. It was possible that America was reached by the Phoenicians, the Carthaginian sailors, the most adventurous of antiquity. But the Phoenicians were early reduced to insignificance among the nations of the world. And while the Carthaginians, whose city had been founded, rose to importance, but the Carthage engaged in wars with Rome and was finally wholly destroyed by the armies in the great city, and all records of their colonies and discoveries was thus lost. And again, it's all about war. They don't want you to know something, go to war, destroy it, nothing. Yeah, F Kitty's in the house. She's driving and listening, so we're giving her a big shout out and saying drive safe. So from Carthage to the Phoenicians, those were all sailor people. Okay, and how do we know this? Well, now there's sailors, and they go, and it says here, and this is in this book already, which is amazing because we don't know about these discoveries, and these are the details we want to know. In 1827, a farmer near Montevideo in Uruguay, South America, is said to have discovered a flat stone which bore an inscription in the language unknown to him. Beneath it was a vault of masonry in which was deposited two ancient swords, a helmet, and a shield. The stone, which had covered the vault, was taken to Montevideo, where it was found that the inscription was in most parts sufficiently legible to be deciphered. According to those learned men who examined it, it was Greek, and it reads as follows. During the dominion of Alexander, the son of Philip, king of Macedon, in the 63rd Olympiad, I don't even know what that word is, so I ain't even going to attempt it. But anyway, it just tells you. So how did a Greek sword and helmet get to Uruguay? Good question, isn't it? Okay, on the handle of the sword was a man's portrait, supposed to be that of Alexander. The helmet was decorated with a fine sculpture representing Achilles dragging the body of Hector around the walls of Troy. If this is indeed a relic of the times before Columbus, it would indicate that during the reign of Alexander the Great, about 330 BC, a party of Greeks had crossed the Atlantic. And there they died and deposited this into a vault, being entombed until it was risen again. But we don't hear about those facts anymore, do we?
No, but here's an interesting thing. After the Trojan Wars, I'm trying to think of his name, tried to get back home and ended up getting swamped and, went to the island of Cyclops and, what was his name?
I don't know. Offhand. There's a lot of them, but, guys.
There was the Iliad and the Odyssey. The Odyssey was all about him. So, yes. So what if, they actually made it across the ocean?
Well, yeah, exactly.
In the stories of, from the Iliad and the Odyssey. So, that, what if, supposedly they just got tossed around in the Mediterranean Sea, but Ulysses, that's the guy's name. So, but what if they got blowed out to sea, literally, and for days and days and days and blah, 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 but that they actually ended up you know, in the Americas. That would be weird to say the least. But also we have to remember that, you know, the Americas and Africa and everything was Pangea at one time.
Yep.
So the continents weren't nearly as far apart. Now, we don't know how far apart they were back then, but we do know that they were closer. We just don't know how close. So keep that in mind.
Yeah. Well, it just goes on and says about the stories of America. It would be noticed that there was accounts of men who reached the western shores of the Atlantic, and it would seem that there are none of whom it is said that they returned. Yet the fables of Atlantis show that sometime the people of East Continent must have known something of the Western. And then it says Central America, surprisingly, you notice that the Central America pyramids and the Egyptian pyramids and all they have very similar things going on there, you know.
Right.
So we're going to move on to the Middle Ages. We find a claim of another discovery of America, but this time from the other coast. In 1761, a French scholar whose name is now almost unknown and announced to the world that the Chinese discovered America in the 5th century AD. He derived this information from the official annals of the Chinese Empire, to which he claimed he had gained access. He tells us that he found that in the year 499 AD, a Chinese Buddhist priest returned to Saigon, and the capital of China, from Taihan, and I'm probably butchering these names, Kalahama Kacha, saying that he had been to a country 20,000 or about 7,000 miles beyond Taihan, and it is supposed by Odysee from this statement of the distance that he had crossed the Bering Strait, journeyed southward to California, or perhaps as far as Mexico. The explorer called this country Fusang, from the fact that the maguey, or American aloe, also plentiful in that part of North America, resembles the plant which the Chinese call Fusang. So obviously, if he found aloe plants, he gotten way down there to California or into Mexico, because you wouldn't find that in the Northwest. So that just proves it. Okay, before considering aim or length, the stories of navigators. First place, the vessels which served for the coasting voyages were in very many cases small and ill-fitted for buffering with the Atlantic storms. So, you know, they'd follow the coast around, like, going to Greenland and Iceland, and you could make it over by doing short jaunts. But then they say possibly a small craft in which early navigators crossed the Atlantic were far safer and more manageable than larger vessels would have been. Without the aid of steam, I mean, gosh darn, you're making your boat out of wood. I guess, a small boat might not be bad, but there are cases where people take rowboats and row across the Atlantic and get in the Guinness Book of World Records, the smallest ships and things like that. You've seen those people. They take a first man to kayak across the Atlantic. Well, if he can do it in a kayak, these people probably could have done it in their boats. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And of course, then they go on and say, well, these people couldn't because they don't have a compass. They don't have navigational tools. They don't know what they're doing. They don't know how to go anywhere. Bull crap. That's what I say. So, and I said, here it is. The mariner's compass was not known in Europe until the 12th century, although it had been in use much earlier than this in China. So China had the compass way before Europe. And who knows, maybe they got it from Europe. A learned Florentine who visited England in 1258 wrote home a letter describing one wonderful thing which he had seen. He had been to the great University of Oxford, which had a European renown for hundreds of years even then, and had been admitted to the study of Friar Roger Bacon. And who do we call Roger Bacon? Roger Bacon was one of those friars who had And we talked about once before, who was hired by the Pope and the King Henry of England to go over and train the friars to map and survey North America. Now we're putting it together, aren't we? A man so wise that most persons thought he must have sold himself to the devil to learn all that he knew. One of the wonderful things which he saw was the power which a piece of magnetic iron ore possessed over iron and steel. And the great friar, putting a long, slender bit of such ore on a piece of light wood and letting it float in some water, showed the astonishing traveler how constantly one end of the rudder needle pointed to the North Star. Wow. So these people weren't stupid. They just didn't have a compass you flip open. You know what I mean? So that's the whole thing. Hey, Elderberry's in the house, and Amber Dawn's in the house. She says, "Yeah, this is why I hated history, because there was a lot of warring, and I don't blame you. War. I remember all the wars. We had to learn about all the wars. There's more to the history than just war." Okay, so now we're going to go to the Welsh guy. Remember we were talking about the Welsh?
But what other thing other than war?
What do you mean? Oh,
trade.
What? Trade, yes, trade.
Trade. So why were these people floating around? They were explorers too, but they were exploring because they were looking for something to trade.
Yes, and back then it was gold. They were gold hungry, gold and ivory, and one other big one, slavery. And we're gonna get to that, the slavery thing. Oh my gosh, that was a terrible thing, and Columbus was knee deep in that the whole entire time. But we're going to get to him in a little bit. But we're going to be we're talking about Columbus and what led him up to this point. And I'm trying to make this as fast as I can, but I know this is going to be a two-parter. So anyway, we got this Welsh guy. In the 12th century, America was discovered by some of their countrymen, the bards or poets and the historians of Wales. Before the 14th century, it was conquered by the King of England and made part of his domain. So it had to be before that. According to them, the death of the king named Owen brought about great decisions amongst his sons, which he had 19 of them, who each desired the kingdom for himself, except Modoc, who seemed to have been a lover of peace. There you go, Amber. A lover of peace. While the other brothers were fighting to decide this question, Modoc sailed away to the westward in search of a country where there was no war. Leaving Ireland to the north, he continued his course until he reached a beautiful and fertile country, supposed by those who fully accepted the account to have been the coast of the southern portion of the United States. But he was not content to enjoy the newfound paradise with the few who had come with him. He wished to share it with all who loved peace. He accordingly returned to Wales and spread the story of his discovery far and wide. 300 answered his call, and with 10 ships he sailed away to the western land. But sad to say, he was never heard of again. Well, there you go. And so Modoc disappeared. And, later on in the years, we did find evidence of him, So it says in 1740, there appeared in a gentleman's magazine, an English periodical of high standing, a letter dated more than 50 years before, narrating how the writer, a Welsh clergyman and graduate of the University of Oxford, had, in company with some other persons, been captured by some Indians of the Tuscarora tribe. Tuscarora tribe near what is now called Cape Hatteras. This occurred about the beginning of the year 1661. The prisoners were in much danger from the Indians, but the revered gentleman, much to his surprise, found that he could make them understand him by speaking his native language, which was substantially the same as their own. By pleading with them in Welsh, he succeeded in making friends with them, and he and his companions were well treated during the 4 months that they remained with the Indians. He adds that he preached to the Indians in Welsh 3 times a week during this period. To this communication, the name of the Reverend Morgan James is signed. So, how did the Indians by Cape Hatters learn Welsh if Prince Modoc hadn't been there?
Right.
Good question, right?
Yep, and it just goes to show you that immigrants have been trying to get onto Cape Hatteras for years.
He also says that the Tuscaroras were the sixth of the famous Six Nations, which were frequently called White Indians. Why would they call them White Indians? Interesting. It is also said that the Constantocas, showed a special hatred for such whites and were of fair complexion. And a red-haired, blue-eyed person would be more cruelly treated by them than one with dark hair and eyes. The enthusiastic Welshmen declared that this was because their remote ancestors had hard battles with Modoc and his followers, and they were instinctively recognized persons of fair hair and bitter enemies. See, so, why would they have a hatred of Modoc or the Welshmen already? Okay, now we're going to move on to Eric the Red. From the saga of Eric the Red, we condensed to modernize the following account. And I'm going to just read a little bit of this. The Thorovlad, I can't say this. I'm sure Nina would pronounce it way better than me. Thorovlad and the son Eric removed from the southwestern coast of Norway to Iceland in consequence of murder after several colonies had been established in this island. Thorovlad died there, and Eric married, moving northward from where he first settled. Eric's name of the Red seems to have been merited by new deeds of violence, for shortly after the birth of his son Leif, he was compelled to remove again, this time to the westward. Disputes between him and the new neighbors arose, as a result of which he was declared an outlaw. And just leave it to an outlaw to start discovering things. Gungbjorn, a countryman of Eric's, had sailed to the westward and brought back word that there was land there, and it was supposed that this land was Gutabarjana, or something like that, now concealed or rendered inaccessible by the descent of the Arctic ice. Eric said he would come back to his friend if he found the land, and says the old chronicle, and that it would appear from this that he was desperate. And if he did not find land, he would perish in the waste of the water. And I'll leave it to the Vikings. Yeah, I'm going. I'm tough, right? The European eyes of the first to touch the point, which named, I can't even say this, mid-Jakul, the term Jakul being applied to the mountain covered with snow. Reaching Greenland in the spring and the summer, he remained there for 2 winters. The third summer, he went to Iceland and anchored his ship near the point which he had sailed. He called the land which he had found Greenland, because he said, people will be attracted thither if the land was and had a good name. Yeah, why would you go to a land that was snowland? Yeah, I want to go to snowland. There's just nothing but ice. Oh, yeah, right. Okay. Remaining in Iceland all winter, probably to get his recruits for his new enterprise, he sailed back to Greenland the next summer with a fleet of 35 vessels. Well, 35 vessels are going to carry a lot of people. But of these, only 14 reached their destination. Some were lost and others driven back. The saga places the settlement 15 winters before Christianity was established by the law of in Iceland, or in 985 AD, Iceland having been settled in 874 AD. One of the settlers who accompanied Eric was named Herjolf. His son, Brighteon, was bold and daring sailor who possessed his own ship while still a very young man. It was custom to spend every second winter with his father, and remainder of the time being given to the sea. According to They set sail from Norway in the summertime and arrived in Iceland, only to find that his father had moved to Greenland. So anyway, so anyway, they ended up coming. Bargen went back to Norway, boasted of his discovery. So he got a group of people together. And then they went on board, and after that, they sailed out to sea and found another land. And they sailed again to the land and cast anchor, then put off boats and went ashore. And the land was flat and covered with wood, and white sands were found far where they went, and the shore was low. The country was accordingly named Markland, which means woodland in Norse tongue. Returning to the ship, they sailed again into the open sea before northeast wind. 2 days later, they came to an island supposed from the distance and direction to have been Nantucket. Hence, their course lay along the coast until they reached Mount Hope Bay. They noted that on the shortest day of the winter, for they remained here all winter, the day was 9 hours long, and the sun rising at 7:30, setting at 4:30. This circumstance confirms the conclusion drawn from the direction and length of their course over the sea, for the time of the sunrise and sunset varies with latitude, and that gives them correspondent to the actual length of the day at this point. That was a neat way to tell you where you were, saying the sun rises and sets right this time. You would know exactly where you are. Isn't that neat? Anyway, so basically they made it down quite a ways. Nantucket. I don't know if you know where Nantucket is, but that's on the coast there, the East Coast. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So I ain't gonna read all of this, but this is quite the interesting story.
Can I add something?
Yes.
Iceland, Greenland. You ever
Yep.
seen any pictures of it?
Yes.
And to the general public out there. So, what's it covered with?
Rocks, ice, and snow.
Right. So if they wanted to build boats of any kind,
Yep.
they had to go where there were trees and building materials. So why did they go south and not back home? Because they were looking for a place with fresh timber that they didn't have to argue or go to war about.
That's
So
right.
when they went south, they were like, oh, look, trees. Because up to that point, they'd been basically camping on the ice.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
And that really limits what you can do. I mean, you can make a few stone tools, but if your axe handle breaks, what you're going to use to replace it with. So, and when you said that they had all those ships or boats or whatever they had to go someplace where there was timber. That's what I just wanted. I just wanted to make that point. So for me, I'd been like, hey guys, let's sail down the coast and see what we got. Oh, look, trees. Ooh, they would have been really excited.
Well, yeah, exactly. Here's Greenland. Look at Greenland. It's not so. There's no trees, just a few houses. There's not much in Greenland. I mean, it's got covered with glaciers like this. It's it's ice and snow most of the year. There's.
And how did they stay warm?
Yeah, that's a good thing. What are you burning?
How did they stay warm? I mean, how did they stay warm?
Yeah, that's a good question. Look, you can see by the tundra there's some grass here in the summer, but there's no trees. You're not building a boat here. You're not building a house. You're looking at polar bears and fields, and I don't even know how they build these houses, for heaven's sakes, or how are they heating these houses? You're right. I moved to Greenland and want to heat my house, and you got to have certain things in order to live in certain places. First, you have to have water. You have to have heat. You have to have food. Sure, you can fish. That's great, but what do you heat your house with back in 10 AD? Kind of thing. There's nothing there. You would have to ship in gas and, everything, electricity, everything would have to be, today we got solar and, we got all kind of wind power, electricity, heat you could do, but, nothing really there. What are you going to feed your animals on in this type of yeah. So anyway, uh, uh, Lucky says Greenland has trees, but they are mostly shrubs or thickets and don't grow very tall. Yes, exactly. Iceland lost most of its trees more than 1,000 years ago when the Viking settlers took their axes to the forest and the countryside. Yes, exactly. You were so right. They came. They were looking for trees. There were trees in Greenland during the Viking era, but they were mainly low-growing shrubs and not notable buildings. Yes, totally, exactly. So where they would go, they would keep sailing until they got to, Nova Scotia, Cape, wherever it is, Nantucket, off the coast of Cape Cod, and that's where they would go.
Oak Island.
Yes, exactly. Now we're going to get up to, we're going to be talking about Columbus himself. Columbus was born in Genoa, Italy. And of course, back in the day, we, know him as, he was born in the year of 1451. And at the young age of 14 years, he went to sea as a young man. And this is where his story begins. Probably as a cabin boy or something like that.
That's just what I was going to say. He probably was a cabin boy.
Yeah. And he went on these ships. I guess he did some pirate ships and the whole 9 yards, but he traveled to all the ports. He was everywhere. He had a pretty adventurous young life. And we're going to leave it off right there so we can get to your story. But next week, we are going to continue on with more Columbus because he is the next one that we know the most about. And even though the other guys, did a lot of discovering and stuff like that, Columbus is the one they write about. And he's the one that kind of threw in the hammer, to get the ball rolling. But these other guys, it was important to talk about them. Why? Because those guys came over here and influenced the Native Americans that were here in small ways, maybe by language, maybe by teaching them some things along the way. I don't know. Maybe they warred with them like King Modoc. They said, they came here. And of course, King Modoc is going to want to conquer the land himself.
One thing they did not have was guns.
Yes, they didn't have guns. They were bad.
They did have swords and shields and spears made out of metal. So they could have brought over a metallurgy.
Yes, that could definitely be. There were, Lucky says, there was Viking armor discovered in Fall River, Massachusetts in 1832. It was lost in a fire in 1843. How convenient was that?
And how can armor disappear in a fire if it's metal? But I digress.
Yeah, that is so true. But like I said, Smithsonian would have got it somewhere along the way.
Yeah,
but anyway,
they heard it somewhere.
They were trying to hide the facts back then too. Well, look at Thomas Jefferson when he sent Lewis and Clark on their journey of discovery. Thomas Jefferson told them, "You're going to be looking for the Welsh to the some sort of sign that they claim this land ahead of us. So that you want to go out there and see if there's any Welsh communities, maybe tribes out there." He had no idea. They were telling him all kinds of things like, hey, there might be mastodons and giants out there and castles with Welshmen in there that already claimed this land. We don't know. We're just guessing.
And see, but here's the thing. Where would they have gotten that idea?
Well, yeah, exactly. You know, you only get ideas if you know some sort of history, and
You
you
know,
know,
and so, and one of the things that, we discuss different things, and some of the stories are legends and they're myths, and but we keep finding that there is history in some of these things. And so my point is there could have been and probably were legends, stories, and brought down, oh no, our ancestors, really, because back in those days, they would have told those kinds of stories around, it wasn't a campfire, but they sat around the fireplace or sat around the hearth in the evening and told stories just like the Native Americans did around their campfires.
absolutely, absolutely.
So
Um,
those folks knew a lot about their history that we don't know today.
yeah, 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 and that's the thing is that those legends and myths were passed down, and we are going to figure this out. We're battling against one big entity, and that's called the Smithsonian, the government, because anytime they discover something, it has to pass through the ring of fire there to get to our knowledge and being put into these books. And that's not true. This isn't true. It doesn't fit the narrative. You've heard it all before, people. It's all kind of diced up. If it doesn't fit the narrative, they throw it out. If you find something in the dirt and you dig it up and you say, look what I found right here, I found it. Well, if you don't have the proper documentation, well, they can't prove you found it there, and therefore it can't be in the history book. You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
And so that's how they control history as we see it today. Only thing is we can really, it's out there. You just have to put the pieces together. You have to start believing people sometimes and saying, well, the guy did find it in his backyard, but well, he didn't document it right. But I still believe he found it in his backyard. Lucky says that metal armor was copper and it melts in low temperature. That's probably why. Anyway, okay, we got let's see, we got a story for you tonight, everyone. And here it is. And good as ever. So if you came to hear the story, well, my gosh, here it is.
And a note about the legends of the English. They quit telling them to each other, sort of, because they invented print.
Yeah.
So you say, well, wait a minute, but no, but the stories, the legends. Yeah, the legends ended up in storybooks. And so, although back in the day, there was a lot of storytelling going on, I don't want to, shy that away because they didn't have radios, etc. And so, what they didn't know by heart, they had books back then that they would sit around and someone would read from. And they would read from the old stories and legends and so forth that had happened before, usually that came from England. So, but anyway, just wanted to point that out. Stories have been being told for a long time. The Indians just didn't write it down.
That's right. Okay, well,
That's
it's all yours. Have at her.
All right, I was in the middle of pulling cards. You ended too quick.
Oh, I'm sorry. Sometimes that comes around. You were talking. I was like, okay, I better get off so you can get on with the story. Regine says, Regine Hutzel says in the house, she says, let's hear the story. She's excited. Savage Lee says, well, night all, love your 1911 America. Thank you. Thank you, Savage Lee. Okay, it's all yours now.
Okie dokie. So I'm trying to clean up my work area. Anyway, so we are still reading from the American Indian fairy tales from Margaret Compton and from it's the rest of it. Oh, yeah, there it is, from 1907. And so it's also Snowbird, the Water Tiger, and etc. So this particular story this week is called The Star Maiden. The Ojibways were a great nation whom the fairies loved. Their land was the home of many spirits, and as long as they lived on the shores of the Great Lakes, the woods in that country were full of fairies. Some of them dwelt in the moss at the roots or on the trunks of trees. Others hid beneath the mushrooms and toadstools. Some changed themselves into bright winged butterflies or tinier insects with shining wings. This they did that they might be near the children they loved and play with them where they could see and be seen. But there were also evil spirits in the land. These burrowed in the ground, gnawed at the roots of the loveliest flowers, and destroyed them. They breathed upon the corn and blighted it. They listened whenever they heard men talking and carried the news to those with whom it would make most mischief. It is because of these wicked fairies that the Indian must be silent in the woods and must not whisper confidences in the camp unless he is sure the spirits are fast asleep under the white blanket of the snow. The Ojibways looked well after the interest of the good spirits. They shielded the flowers and stepped carefully aside when moss or flower was in their path. They brushed no moss from the trees, and they never snared the sunbeams, for on them thousands of fairies came down from the sky. When the chase was over, they sat in the doorways of their wigwams, smoking. And as they watched the blue circles drift and fade into the darkness of the evening, they listened to the voices of the fairies and the insects hum, and thousand tiny noises that night always brings. One night, as they were listening, they saw a bright light shining in the top of the tallest trees. It was a star brighter than all the others, and it seemed very near the earth. When they went close to the tree, they found that it was really caught in the topmost of the branches. The wise men of the tribe were summoned, and for 3 nights they sat about the council fire, but they came to no conclusion about the beautiful star. At last, one of the young warriors went to them and told them that the truth had come to him in a dream. While asleep, the west wind had lifted the curtains of his wigwam, and the light of the star fell upon him. Suddenly, a beautiful maiden stood at his side. She smiled upon him, and he gazed speechless. She told him that her home was in the star, and that in wandering over all the earth, she had seen no land so fair as the land of the Ojibways. Its flowers, its sweet, voiced birds, its rivers, its beautiful lakes, the mountains clothed in green. These had charmed her, and she wished to be no more a wanderer. If they would welcome her, she would make her home among them, and she asked them to choose a place in which she might dwell. The council were greatly pleased, but they could not agree upon what was best to offer the Star Maiden. So they decided to ask her to choose for herself. She searched first among the flowers of the prairie. There she found the fairies' ring, where the little spirits danced on moonlit nights. Here, thought she, I will rest. But as she swung herself backwards and forwards on the stem of a lovely blossom, she heard a terrible noise and fled in great fear. A vast herd of buffaloes came and took possession of the fairies' ring, where they rolled over one another and bellowed so that they could be heard far from the trail. No gentle Star Maiden could choose such a resting place. She next sought the mountain rose. It was cool and pleasant. The moss was soft to her dainty feet, and she could talk to the spirits she loved, whose homes were in the stars. But the mountain was steep, and huge rocks hid her view the nation that she loved. She was almost in despair when one day, as she looked down from the edge of the wild rose leaf, she saw a white flower with a heart of gold shining on the waters of the lake below her. As she looked, a canoe steered by the young warrior who had told her wishes to his people shot past, and his strong brown hand brushed the edge of the flower. That is the home for me, she cried, and half skipping, half flying, down the side of the mountain, she quickly made her way to the flower and hid herself in its bosom. There she could watch the stars as well when she looked upward from the cup of the mountain rose. There she could talk to the star spirits, for they bathed in the clear lake. And best of all, there she could watch the people whom she loved, for their canoes were always upon the water. The end. That was a short one.
Yeah, that was a short one. Oh man. Maybe you're gonna do a second one? I don't know how long is left.
Well, I'm scrolling down. The next one is called The Fighting Hare.
Yeah, I don't know. That one seems a little longer, but maybe 3 or 4 pages, something like that.
Well, let me get a sip to drink, and you want to do the next one?
If you want, we got that was pretty short.
That was quick. Okay.
Well, let me get the magic. I don't know, man. I just scroll a little bit too fast, like you do sometimes, and scroll all the way back to the magic feather.
I know that sucks when that happens, don't it?
Yeah, like the fighting hare. That's the next one?
Yep.
Okay. Well,
so everybody, you get a treat tonight. You get 2 stories if you're still hanging out.
We're doing a twofer, everyone. I know.
Twofer on a Tuesday twofer.
Richard the Red's here. He loves the stories, I think he says. But anyway, okay. But anyway, okay. Whenever you're ready.
Alrighty then. Our second story for tonight is called The Fighting Hare. And again, this is in the American Indian Fairy Tales, of Snowbird the White Tiger by Margaret Compton, 1907. The Fighting Hare. The Prince of the Hares was playing with his children in front of his burrow one day when, growing tired, he threw back his ears, drew in his feet, and lay down to sleep. Meanwhile, the sun came up and passed so close to the earth that it burnt his back full of holes. The hare felt very sore, and as he rubbed himself, his fur came off in great patches, so that his beauty was spoiled. He was furiously angry, and starting up, cried out that he would fight the sun, and in spite of all that his friends could say, went in pursuit of him. The land where the hare lived was a vast plain. When he had come to the end of it, he climbed a high hill in order to look over the country. He saw below him on the other side a field of green plumes nodding to the west wind. He had never seen corn growing before, and he did not know what these plumes were. He ran eagerly to the place, broke off as many as he could carry, and hid them behind the rocks. Then he rubbed 2 dead branches together and made a fire in which he roasted the corn. Presently, the owner came along and, seeing the damage done, called his warriors to fight the thief. The hare had burrowed a hole at the side of the rock, and when the arrows were hurled at him, he blew them back with his magic breath. The warriors ran to catch him, but so great was their haste that one rushed upon another, and each caught only the other's fists. Then they thought of digging him out. They worked until the Sun Prince was halfway home. But before they had caught sight of the hare, he had escaped through a secret passage. He ran to a rock a little way off and higher than the one beneath which they were digging, and hurled his magic ball at the burrow, breaking away the floor and the sides so that it fell in, burying the chief and all his followers. The next morning, the hare saw 2 men making arrowheads of hot rocks. He watched them heating the rocks, and when they were red hot, he cried out, "Oh, hot rocks will not burn me." The men looked up, and one of them said, "Are you a wizard?" "No," said the hare, "but I am a better man than you are, or the man who is working with you. I will lie on the hot rocks if you will let me hold you on them in the same manner." They agreed. So when the rocks were glowing, the hare laid himself on top of them, and the men pressed him down against them with their hands. But he breathed heavily, and his magic breath so cooled the part on which he was lying that not a particle of his fur was singed. The men, having no such protection, soon begged for mercy, but the hare held them to their promise, and they both perished. "So much for making oneself equal to a wizard," said the hare to himself as he continued his journey. The following day, he passed by a high cliff round which the winds blew so hard that it was known by the men of that country as Hurricane Cliff. It overhung a deep ravine in which were sunflowers as tall as trees, and the heads were heavy with seeds. The hare took a handful of seeds and amused himself by throwing them into the air and catching them in his mouth. While doing this, he heard voices, and looking up, saw a group of women who were plotting to kill him. "Aho," they said, "let us call the hurricane to hurl a rock down on him." The hare said nothing, but went in full sight of them and began eating the seeds with great relish. The women looked at them longingly and finally asked him to share his dainties with them, not knowing what he really had. He tossed a handful of seeds into the air, and they tried hard to catch them, but failed again and again, each time going nearer to the edge of the cliff, till in her eagerness, the one nearest the edge reached out too far and fell into the ravine. The others were so close that they fell over her, so all but two were dashed to pieces, and these vowed vengeance on the hare. He met them soon afterwards, gathering berries, and called out that he would give them the revenge they asked, and they wished. "Come," said he, "you may blow these blackberry thorns and leaves into my eyes. I will let you try first, and if you do not blind me, you must let me do the same to you." They took him at his word and threw a handful of little else than thorns, but by breathing as he had done when on the hot rocks, he blew them all from him. The women trusted to their hands to protect them, but the hare aimed well, and the thorns passed between their fingers and put their eyes quite out. He had one more adventure with women. While passing through a lonely place, he saw several women weaving jugs of willow, which they made watertight by smearing them inside with pitch. They, too, were planning to destroy him. He went boldly up to them and proposed that they should put him inside one of the jugs. As he could not get into those already made, they put him into one that was not finished and wove the neck of the jug about him, making it very small so that he should not escape. While they were laughing at the ease with which he had been caught, he burst the jug open and stepped out unhurt. He then compelled them to get inside of the jugs and to let him weave the necks about them. He worked slowly at first to make them think that he didn't know how to weave, but he made the necks strong and fastened them well. Then he rolled the jugs about till the women were shaken and badly bruised. They threatened to be revenged, but when he knocked them harder and their blood ran out over the ground, they begged him to let them out. He would not. But after a time, thinking that they had suffered enough, he struck each jug with his magic ball and put them out of their misery. A tarantula who had watched the hare resolved to punish him by his own methods. The spider had a magic club which poisoned everything it struck, but never injured him. He called out to the hare and asked to be struck with the club. The hare raised it and beat him on the head and back, but the spider remained unhurt. He began to suspect something wrong, and just before it was his turn to be struck, he changed the spider's club for his magic ball and killed the insect with one blow. Thus he traveled on, conquering all who opposed him or plotted against him, till he came to the edge of the world. There he saw a high cliff covered with trees of all sizes and kinds. He went up to the maple and said, "What are you good for, pray?" The maple shook its leaves in great disdain and said, "I am the food of the great head. The blood of my children is sweet and nourishing, and they give it freely to the nations." The hare next went to the larch and asked, "What are you good for?" "I," said the larch, "bind together the canoes of the people. If it were not for me, they could not sail upon the lakes and rivers." The cedar answered the question by saying, "I make the canoes strong so that they will bear the weight of the great warriors. If it were not for me, none but women and children could still sail on the waters." The birch stood next in his way and said, "If it were not for me, you could make no canoes at all. My bark is for the picture writing of the people. How, but for me, could one chief talk to his brother who lives by the distant river?" The fir tree boasted of its balsam, without which the canoe could not glide upon the water. "Ugh," said the hare. "You all say that no canoe could be made without you. You, linden, you have no part in these canoes. What are you good for?" "I," said the linden, "am for the cradles of the children. Without me, where could they be rocked and put to sleep when the beautiful red has gone from the sky and the night comes? From me you take the basswood for your bowls and your drinking cups." The oak stood in his path, and before the question was put to it, touched by his head with its lower branches, and said in a deep voice, "I shelter the great warriors. I mark the spot for their councils. From my boughs are made the swift arrows that bring food to the feet of the hunter and carry death to his enemies." The ash sighed and whispered, "From me is taken the bow that speeds the arrow in its flight." The red willow drooped its head as it said, "My bark is for the pipe of the Indian. My wands are to bid him to the feast. My osiers are for his baskets, his mats, and his water jugs." Thus, every tree claimed to be of so much use that men could not do without it. At last the hare came to a little tree, hardly more than a shrub, many of whose leaves were blighted. "Of what use are you?" asked he. "None," said the tree, "unless you can use me." The end. We shall see," said the hare. He went to the top of the cliff and saw that the sun was just rising. It caught sight of him at the same moment, and knowing that he had come for vengeance, it retreated quickly into its cave. It stayed there for 3 days, and all the world suffered from cold and darkness. At last, the noise of the people in their discontent reached the sun, and he was obliged to come out. The hare had his arrows ready and aimed many at him, but they fell short of their mark. When the sun was directly overhead, he drew forth a magic arrow, which he dipped into a magic tear that escaped from his eye. With this, he took good aim. It struck the sun and broke it into thousands of fragments. The flying pieces set the whole world on fire. It burned the forest, the prairie, the villages, the corn, and the wild rice, the pumpkin vines and the gourds, the grapes and the nuts. The children of the hare prince ran into their burrow, and the great elk led many of the other animals into a vast field in the Rocky Mountains, around which was drawn a sacred line that no fire could cross. The fire burnt the cliff at the edge of the world. The hare sought refuge first in one tree and then in another, but they were all destroyed except the little one that had said it was of no use. It was so small that it could not wholly protect him. His tail, his back, his feet, and the tips of his ears were burnt, every part of him except his head. He rolled over and over trying to get relief, but his pain was so great that his eyes burst, and the water gushing from them put out the fire. The sun had been conquered and was summoned to appear before the council. They found him guilty of cruelty and indifference to the welfare of men. So he was compelled to travel the same trail day after day for all time and at a fixed distance from the earth. Thus he can no longer burn trees or animals, nor can he leave them in cold and darkness. That's the end.
I thought there was the end before, and I'm clicking on the things, and all of a sudden you start reading. I'm like, oh crap!
I realized that somehow I was like, this can't be the end. No, wait a minute, And then because I was scrolling down, and I was like, wait a minute, no, there's a picture, and how they put the pictures in and skip a page, and so. Yeah. But I was just ahead of you, just a little bit.
I thought you said. And the end. And I'm like, I'm watching the thing. I'm like, oh, that was a strange story that ended just like that. And then there was this pause, and I click up, and here I am. And all of a sudden you go, and then, I'm like, what? Oh no, click. Oh, how do I get back?
That's what you call a cliffhanger.
Yeah, I know. Wow. Part 2. Oh boy, we're having too much fun.
And as Paul Harvey says, and now the rest of the story,
Exactly. Yeah. Anyway, very good. I like that one. The little tree that, what are you good for? Nothing, unless you can use me. I'm good for nothing. Yep. Oh boy, there's some good ones in there. But see, there's always a little bit of something in there. You wonder about the fire, the great fire, Is this their way of passing on the great fire? Maybe from a comet or something that destroyed the earth. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, because it split it into many pieces, and the pieces fell and burned the earth. But it made it to the mountains, but there was a sacred line there, interesting. It burned everywhere, but wait a minute, what about that? No, it couldn't burn over there. Why? There was a sacred line in the dirt.
Yeah, sacred line. What did that sacred line do? That's a good question, we think about these things, it's like, oh boy, that's right. Thing is getting hot.
So are you ready? I'm finishing up. I got 4 cards so far,
Okay.
and boy, what a strange set.
Oh boy.
Yeah, 5 cards, and three of them are insects.
Really?
Yeah.
What do we
And
got?
during the story, it was like, was it the first one said something about the fairies turning into bright objects, things, butterflies. Well, the second card, I picked this before I started the story, by the way, is a butterfly. Kawinky
Nice.
dink.
Yeah.
You know how those kawinky dinks are. So
We
let me
do.
get the book and get my glasses on.
What else do we got?
The first one is turkey,
Hey,
upside down. The second one is butterfly, upside down. The third one is spider, upside down. The fourth one is ant, right side up. And the last one is owl, upside down. Now, we haven't had turkey in a while. Butterfly, again, I can't remember last time we had spider, ant, and owl. These 5 cards are very fresh as far as me pulling them. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Over the last how many times? I mean, I can't remember the last time ant came up.
Yeah, Ant has been on a long, long time.
Now we have had turkey because that's the, but it's been a while since turkey was around. So that's 31.
Yep. Okay. All right. And you're ready to go whenever, but got turkey. And it's going to be Thanksgiving in another month or so. As we get done with Columbus, we'll be talking about the Pilgrims and how they subdued the Indians and took all their turkeys.
Yeah.
And it wasn't because
turkey is called a giveaway. Turkey is actually thought to be the giveaway eagle or the South eagle for many native peoples. The philosophy of giveaway was practiced by many tribes. Simply stated, it is the deep and abiding recognition of the sacrifice of both self and others. Spectators unfamiliar with the cultural phenomena of the potlatch or the giveaway ceremony are often mystified by it. A tribal member may gladly give away all of his or her what they own and do so and do without in order to help the people. Turkey was the medicine of many saints and mystics. Celebrate if you have turkey medicine. Your virtues are many. You have tremendous self. You act and react on the behalf of others. You aspire to help those who need help. This is not out of the sense of self-righteousness, moralism, or religious guilt. It's because you just feel you need the need to do it. Now, if turkey is upside down, there are several aspects to pulling the gobbler card in the reverse position. Are you gobbling up anything and everything out of fear or lack? Are you holding on too tight and refusing to let go of a dime for charity? It could be that the Scrooge in you has grown accustomed to the miserly aspect of living. If not, you might look at the possibility that you are fearful of spending money at this time. Another aspect of contrary gobbling is the idea that the world owes you something and that you do not need to recycle the energy. Remember, never give to receive. That is manipulation. Giving is without regret and with a joyful heart, or the giveaway has lost its true meaning. Very interesting. Number 9. So what's the message in that? You know, a lot of stuff going on right now. So you have to make sure that, you know, you're not looking at somebody else and say, well, you know, do you owe me something? Or does the government owe you something? Or, you know, but one thing is that, you know, we have to be self-sufficient up to a point. We have to be able to take care of ourselves. So butterfly is transformation. So the butterfly story is simple, you know, in that the power of the butterfly brings us to, is akin to the air. It is the mind and the ability to know the mind or to change it. It is the act and the art of transformation. So first you start out in the egg stage, and then you move to the larvae stage, and then you move to the cocoon stage, and then finally you bust out and at the end of the chrysalis, and you become a butterfly. So butterfly is always about the transformation. So life, and as the butterfly, there are those 4 stages. And so the first stage is just a thought or an idea. The second stage is making a decision as to what to do. The third stage is, can you develop and do something to make the idea a reality? And the fourth stage is the birth stage, to which the idea has been completed. So if you have drawn the butterfly reversed, your lesson is a simple one. That's good. There is a need for change in your life that you are not recognizing. This could be a possible need for freedom, for vacation, for a new job. You may believe that change is too difficult, and you may rule it out to preserve the comfort of old habits. But in ruling out any possibility of change, you are saying that the courage of butterfly has been lost. Why? Because you know the 4 basic stages of change in the butterfly. Because there is a totally different world outside the cocoon where the known realities of the chrysalis are no longer applicable. So as soon as, you know, I live on my, you know, little 18-acre place here, and it's fun walking around and riding around on the on the John Deere lawnmower. But when I leave the property and drive around, it's a different world. So basically, it's the same. When you leave your little chrysalis area, it's different out there. So next one up is spider, number 43. Number 43, spider is weaving. We were talking about weaving earlier. Spider wove the web that brought humans the first picture of the alphabet. The letters were part of the angles of her web. Deer asked Spider what she was weaving and why all the lines looked like symbols. Spider replied, "Why, dear, it is time for the Earth's children to learn to make records of their progress in their Earth walk." Deer answered Spider, "But they already have pictures that show through symbols the stories of their experiences." "Yes," Spider said, "but Earth's children are growing more complex. and their future generations will need to know more. That the ones to come won't remember how to read the pictures or the petroglyphs. The web of fate also represents a wheel of life, which does not include any alternatives or solutions. It is typically human to get caught in the polarity of good or bad fortune without realizing that we can change it at any time. Remember that. If we are not decisive enough about changing our lots in life, we may end up being consumed by our fears and limitations. Now, what did the upside down butterfly just say? You might not want to change. There's two. You might be caught in your own web of fear. So the upside down. The contrary aspect of spider is akin to the negative side of women. Spider will eat her mate if she gets too caught up in herself to see the validity of honoring the male energy. The warrior at her side is a strong and balancing force. If you become disdainful of your mate, male or female, and have felt very superior recently, you are not honoring either side of your male or female side. If you are not presently in a relationship, you may have chosen a member of your family or a workmate to harness. This type of negative criticism only breaks down relationships. If this does not apply to your situation, take a look at another message that contrary spider medicine brings: lack of creativity. If you fail to use your talents to get the web spinning, your lack of creativity can change into destructiveness. Ooh. If you are feeling stagnant and unable to move in a positive direction, you may come to resent others who are doing well. This resentment will become a black widow spider and eat you up, and the only one to mourn your demise will be you. Get moving. Find joy and new ideas in the accomplishments of others, and use them to propel you into a new phase of creativity, spinning on your own web of delight. Observe spider's web and find pleasure in the ideas you receive from her universal language and from the universe. The next one in is ant, number 32. And ant is about patience. Ant can carry a leaf for hundreds of miles just to get it back to the anthill. Ant is a builder like beaver, is aggressive like badger, has stamina like elk, scrutiny like mouse, and giveaway like turkey. Every ant in an anthill is part of the ant group mind, as all the ants work for the queen and the hive. Self-sacrifice is a part of ant medicine. Now, here's ant, which is self-sacrifice, and turkey is also the giveaway. So, ant people are active, community-minded folk who see the greater future needs of their town. Ant people are planners, like squirrel, and are content to see their dreams being built a little at a time. In today's society, that is a rare quality. Patience does have its rewards. Ant people have a knowing about the sweet victory at the end of the line. There is never a concern about going without. If they are late for the opening of a sale, if what they want is sold out, they are sure that something of equal or better value is available. So Ant, much patience, and it was right side up. Ant is working for the good of the whole. Are you? If you are, be assured that the whole wants the same goodness for you, and that it will be provided. The last is Owl upside down, 21. Patience. And if you're sitting around and you don't know what's going on, you might need to get up off your duff and get busy spinning. Oops, I passed it. I was actually looking at it and I moved it. Owl is deception. Now, I'm probably say that, most of us are being led with deception. People are trying to deceive us. Owl medicine is symbolically associated with clairvoyance, astral projection, and magic of both black and white. Owl is called the night eagle, and traditionally, owl sits in the east, the place of illumination. Owl hunts its prey at night and is very, 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 very quiet. Owl is oftentimes the medicine of sorcerers and witches. If owl is your medicine, you will be drawn to magical practices and stay away from the dark arts. If owl is your personal medicine, no one can deceive you about what they are doing, no matter how hard they try to disguise it or hide it from you. Now, if it's upside down, if you have owl upside down in your cards, you have been greatly deceived by either yourself or another or others. Perhaps witchcraft or black magic is being used against you, or maybe you are using witchcraft or sorcery to aid you when you should be praying and asking the Great Spirit for guidance. So if for anybody's out there who's trying to use owl in the negative position, just ask the Creator, ask the Great Spirit for guidance. The message is to befriend the darkness inside yourself. Look deeply, and soon the bright light of dawn will illuminate you. Then ask yourself what you are in the dark about. So if you're in the darkness and owl is there, look inside yourself and see what's up. Deception. Owl tells you to keep an eye on your property and your loved ones. Remember that owl is always asking, who? So we've got turkey, that's the giveaway. And we've got butterfly change. And, upside down. And so, we need to make sure that we're, not getting caught in the web of the spider. Are we afraid of change with butterfly? Are we caught in the web with the spider? And if we ask Ant for patience, we might be able to get through the deception that is coming through with the owl card. How about that one for a reading? So thank you very much. I hope that does any and all of you some good with that simple reading. We are all being deceived in all kinds of ways, and we need to be aware of that. And we need to have patience. Whether these cards were actually in, my spirit guides are honing at me to look at the cards again. And it's not necessarily the way I pulled them. They were just how they came out of the deck. So that, we are being deceived, and we have to be patient with what's going on. And we do have to keep, moving, or otherwise we're going to get caught up in their web. And we do have to look at, we are in a transitional stage like butterfly. So, and guess what? Turkey's coming up, So anyway, wow, these are good cards tonight.
Absolutely. Very good cards. Lots of with all of that. So I hope everybody.
And it makes sense. Okay. But anyway, so thank you, my dear friends out there. I hope you liked the stories. We ended up with 2 of them tonight. And I thank you for letting me pull those cards for you. So.
Yep. Good stories. Good stories. Thank you so much. And thank you, everybody, for joining us. We got Chloe, Regine Hutchinson, Savage Lee, Lucky Stone. He loves spiders. And F. Kitty, Queen Peachy Keen. Thank you. Elderberry is in the house. And Nina the Mystic. And, let's see. Amber Dawn come to join us for a little while. And Deborah L. Smith. Well, thank you all for joining in Witchy Moon, and I hope I didn't miss anybody, but thank you all off the hook. Let's see who else is here. I think I got everybody. Scotty Boy. Scotty Boy was in the house early, first on. I don't know where he went, if he's still here or not, but we got 12 people watching, so maybe he still is. But anyhow, thank you, everyone. For being here. Chloe says, have a great night, everyone. Much love and favor to each one of you. But anyway, are you having a show tonight?
For a bit, I think.
All right, sounds good. So join David over on his channel over there, the David Null channel, and he will have a great show to be talking about something tonight, and I'm sure it's going to be good, as it always is. Yes, if it's the flood or if it's what's going on. Oh boy, I got some good stuff. I got some cool stuff coming up this month because it's October. I got a book called Afterlife, Helping Stuck Souls Cross Over. And when I seen that and I read a little bit about it, it sounded like somebody else I know that finds spirits in statues and things like that and helps them out when they need a hand. And I wanted to find out about that, and maybe we'll do a show on that. Anyway, I've
talked to a statue or 2 in my lifetime.
You have? Cool.
Yeah.
I have to read that
and
book.
It's when they answer back that it really gets interesting.
It is. And I also got some Preston Dennett books, the 25 true UFO stories that we're going to be going through. Have you had a UFO encounter or not? That's the question. And is it a first, second, or third degree one, or the 5th kind? So anyway, with the second moon now orbiting the Earth and asteroids coming at us from all over the place, are we looking up? That is the big question. So maybe we'll be doing something like that on Saturday. Who knows? You got to jump in and join us there, right? And it's like Lucky says, have a fantastic week, everyone. Yes, we will be back on Saturday for sure. And in the meantime, we'll have plenty of Milky Way shorts coming at you. David Null telling stories from the past couple months ago now. So they'll be new and fresh, cut and dried. I got a whole bunch of them lined up, ready to go. How about that? Anyway, with that, do remember, don't get caught up in the flood. Don't go into deep water. Stay safe. Stay prepared. And remember, no matter where you live, what's going on, you may have your day where you need to be a prepper. Be prepared. Don't be scared. That's what I'm saying. And with that,
and if you can help, in some of this and you're, not too far away and you can go help somebody, I understand from some of the last stuff. I mean, Trump was in Valdosta, just 40 miles from here, yesterday, literally, handing stuff out and waiting around and stuff, and that to me is like, that's showing no matter who or what, there are folks who are willing to pitch in and help. So there are those folks who will just look out the window and go, wow, that person needs some help. And then there are folks who wade into the water and help, help to drag a woman out of a car and, like was done with that reporter. So, but anyway, so my dear friends, and I know I jumped in here in front of you, but, and from my point of view, continue to pray for these people. And if you're anywhere in the neighborhood and you can help or take water, these folks they just need fresh water, and to wash their hands in. And, so it's a bad situation for them. So back to you, Robert.
Well, yeah. And like I said, even if you can't get out there, we did a show on what's the glue that holds us together. Just remember, we are all together. We're not separated. We're all humans. We're all together. We can't be looking at it one way or another, regardless of what goes on. They are part of you somewhere along the line. Maybe your great ancestor somewhere in the DNA line, but some way or another, we're all human. So, just send them healing energy.
They're part of humanity, just like you and me.
That's right. Just in a different place, having a different experience.
That's all.
That's
and right now they're having a really nasty experience. So
exactly. And so I wish well to everybody. And remember, do nice things for yourself and the neighbors and whoever in your own community too. That's where you get the most benefit of life, is when you contribute to it. And remember, most of all, be the frequency you want to receive, everybody. Love you all. Peace, everybody.
Cheers.